The Secrets of Star Wars is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give.
Hi, this is Vanessa Marshall. I play Hera Syndulla on Star Wars Rebels, and you're listening to the Secrets of Star Wars podcast. May the Force be with you always.
You're listening to the Secrets of Star Wars, episode 157.
Hello there.
It's a power that Jedi have that lets them control people and make things float.
Impressive. Every word in that sentence was wrong.
Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope.
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
It's against my programming to impersonate a deity.
That's not how the Force works.
Force is with me, and I am with the Force, and I fear nothing.
Remember, the Force will be with you, always.
Hello there, everyone. I'm Mike Creavey, aka Old Ben, and you're listening to The Secrets of Star Wars, where we talk about everything connected to that galaxy far, far away, including the deeper themes and meanings. Please be sure to share this podcast on Twitter or Facebook and let us know how we're doing by leaving us a review. On this episode of Secrets of Star Wars, we're thrilled to take a closer look at Mandalorian Season 3, Episode 7, Chapter 23. There's a lot of titles here. Chapter 23, The Spies. And this is the, of course, second to last episode in this season, penultimate, as they say, which I realized, by the way, I used that word incorrectly for many years before I really realized. So now I'm making up for lost time. So there's a lot to discuss and we're going to get right into it. So joining me tonight to unpack all of this are, first up, Josh Beeghley. Josh, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Very good. Thank you. And next up we have Robert King. Robert, how's it going?
Doing well. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. And then last but not least, Father Geoff Horton. Welcome again. How are you doing?
Doing well. Thank you.
Well, I wanted to ask you guys kind of first up here, since I'm not sure how many of you were on the most recent episode, I guess it would have been was closest to when there was stuff coming out from Star Wars Celebration. So I don't want to spend too much time on it, but just wanted to see if you guys had any thoughts or just any initial reactions, things you're excited about from that, announcement panel, all the different panels they had, and especially projects coming up.
I have a bad feeling about this.
Oh, gee.
Say more about that.
Especially the movies. I mean, Lucasfilm or Disney hasn't finished a Star Wars movie in ages anyway.
Yeah.
But I have real reservations about wanting to go back and do an Origin of the Force movie. I think the Force works much better as an unexplained, it is what it is. I read a lot of the Legends continuity, and the further they got into trying to explain the Force, the weirder and less interesting it got, and I can't see anything stopping that from happening again.
Do you fear something kind of like the, for those who, and I don't know if I want to take a particular side here, but, for those of us who at least scratched our heads a little bit over all the midichlorian stuff that came out of nowhere with the prequels, do you see something like that kind of going where we go more into...
The midichlorians aren't the problem. The bizarre, too much Joseph Campbell spirituality, floating around with whatever the latest sci-fi author wanted to throw in with it.
Okay.
I think the Force is better as it's out there, it exists. We don't know where it came from or what it does, than trying to pin it down.
Was it Sir Alec Guinness's original? I think it was like someone did the word count or something. It's like 40 words or something that he says.
Yeah,
in the original movie. It's like
the Force is something
field, right?
You make objects fly.
Right. Yeah, it's exactly what Ray said it is. It's a power. You can make things float. Like, done. No.
I thought that movie was supposed to be about the origin of the Jedi. Maybe did I misread it? Is it about the origin of the Force instead?
You're right.
It's ambiguous.
It's origin of the Jedi, but it's also there's this. The more you explore what the Force is, versus George Lucas was very smart to leave it as ambiguous as possible. The more you try to pin it down, the worse it gets.
Yeah.
If I recall reading, he did that very deliberately. He didn't want to push it into anything.
Pin it down too much. It's
right,
definitely something that they have to be careful about for sure, one way or the other. How about you, Josh? Did you have any thoughts about anything in particular looking forward to or thoughts?
I mean, I was sort of on the same line as Robert there of it being about sort of like the foundations of the Jedi and how they came to be. I was excited for that. And on the different plots, I mean, I know we talked about it last episode, but Ahsoka coming out is really exciting. And they, after we were finished recording, they announced who the actual actor was going to be for Thrawn.
Oh,
and,
okay.
It's his voice actor, but I'm really excited for that too.
He was tricky too, because he's, I think we could have it would be fun to just do a whole show. Maybe people wouldn't be interested in this, but a whole show on the morality of Star Wars, potential Star Wars actors lying about whether they're in it or not, for the sake of secrecy. Because Lars Mikkelsen, I saw an interview with him like months ago, because people were speculating, and he said something about like, well, no, I haven't gotten any calls. And I said, right before they announced him, I was like, he didn't say he didn't get emails.
Right here for you.
A letter in the mail, like he just said calls. So,
and then sort of with that as well, it's something else that came up that I saw today actually was that Disney's hoping to lean more into Star Wars in general, and like Avatar and Marvel and things like that. Which I don't know. There's pros and cons to that. One, more content, which will be always fun, but also then it's a quality and quantity thing.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be interesting to see how that sort of develops.
Sure. How about you, Robert?
I mean, I was honestly excited to see how the 3 movies they announced kind of fit together. They seem like, they talked about the sequel trilogy when they originally announced that, when Disney first took over. Right. That was supposed to sort of wrap up the Skywalker saga. And now it looks like they're kind of doing that in a weird way again. They're going to say, okay, well, here's the beginning and the end of the Jedi saga. And then with this Rey movie, they're going to start something new. And so they're kind of putting the brackets around everything that's gone before and giving themselves an opening to start creating content in a new and different direction. And I definitely like the impulse behind that. I'm a little apprehensive about their ability to pull it off because, we've seen Disney has been real hit and miss, especially with the cinematic offerings. But I always liked Rey as a character. Rey and Finn were fantastic. Well, I guess I should say Rey and Finn were fantastic potential characters. And I always felt like, oh, there's so much there if they only had some good writing behind them. And so I'm kind of, I doubt John Boyega could ever be convinced to come back to Star Wars, but I'm glad to see at least that Rey is going to have another opportunity to actually develop as a character.
Mm-hmm. It makes me long for the days when Lucas was writing scripts, but that might be going too far.
Right. Even he needed a little help. Oh my. Well, let's jump in here to this Mandalorian episode because there's a lot to unpack here. But let me just give the little quick, just from Wikipedia, the overall basic plot synopsis here. Again, spoilers ahead, but everybody should know that by now, right? So we jump in here, Moff Gideon, back on the scene, informed by, and we were debating this earlier, and I can't remember because I've heard it both ways, but I think I'm going to go with Elia Kane. I'm going to say that. We'll see I'll fix it later if I have to, but Elia Kane informs Moff Gideon secretly down in Coruscant in the depths of the cities, it's all the city, I guess, but she's in the lower levels, right? Hiding away as villains do. She warns him about the Mandalorians' intent to retake their world. Gideon relays this information to the Shadow Council, a group of Imperial remnant warlords. He requests reinforcements from Commandant Brendel Hux, questions Captain Pelion on the absence of Grand Admiral Thrawn. Reassembling on Navarro, Bo-Katan unites the Mandalorian clans and prepares for a recon party to explore the surface of Mandalore and locate the Great Forge. Before leaving, Greef Karga presents Din Djarin with IG-12, a rebuilt version of IG-11. We're going to talk about that, which is able to be controlled by Grogu. On Mandalore, the group meets another surviving clan who is loyal to Bo-Katan. Bo-Katan admits that she surrendered to Gideon shortly after the Night of 1,000 Tears, hoping that her people would be spared from further harm. The party finds the Great Forge, but is ambushed by Beskar enhanced stormtroopers. Jaren is captured by Gideon, who reveals his intent to complete the Great Purge of Mandalore. He attempts to kill the search party, but Bo-Katan uses her darksaber to make an escape for the group, with Paz Vizsla staying behind to buy time. Vizsla fights off, it says, well, okay, yeah, he fights off the stormtroopers, but they do have this, he fights the Praetorian guards unsuccessfully, and then we go right to credits. So, again, a lot packed in there, and I just want to jump right into that Shadow Council scene at the beginning and just, I want to throw this out there and see what you guys think. We can kind of go around a little bit here, but my note I said, and the guys saw this ahead of time, but I think it's fair to say rabbit holes abound if you try to understand every detail of who everyone here is, what's going on, what is going on and what's been going on since the fall of the Empire, which is more ambiguous now than we originally thought. And there's all this stuff from games and comics and books and all this stuff that I just kind of quit after 20 minutes of it. But only because I didn't have time, not because I'm not interested. But you have, Palpatine's contingency plan, Operation Cinder that really kicked that off. There's all these things from various novels about what happened in the wake of the Battle of Endor. And how some remnants went out to the unknown regions, the seeds of the First Order. So in general, what do you guys think of this scene? Anything that you noticed at first, or, important things you picked up on here? Maybe start with you, Josh.
Now that we're sort of talking about it with it also being called the Shadow Council and stuff, it reminds me of Crimson Dawn and that whole meeting with Maul and his people of sort of trying to pick up the remnants of what's sort of left and to create something for themselves to be known. I mean, Gideon has his own plans, Hux has his own, but also I didn't realize at first that it was a different Hux. That is something that confused me, and then
it's pretty good casting.
Yeah, it was his brother.
Believable.
General Weasley.
Yeah. But it definitely threw me off for a minute. I thought it was just a younger version of Hux. So I was like, okay, cool. That's going to be him. He's going to control the First Order army. And I'm like, no. So I had no idea who he really was and what his plan was.
Well, I read somewhere, I think it says I think the Hux
I checked Wikipedia, and it's the one in Force Awakens is his illegitimate son.
His illegitimate son, yeah. Because that's still 25 or so years out, I think, right? Roughly.
Something like that.
And the little clues there, right? Like Gideon says about your obsession is with cloning, yet he just walked past a bunch of tanks that look more like Snoke pickle jars. We keep coming back to that, so I don't know how that all connects yet. But how about you, Father? What would you pick up on there?
I was thinking there's an awful lot of background material. I don't have any idea who any of these people are either, except for the names we just mentioned. Fortunately, it seems not to matter too much. Thrawn, because everybody knows who Thrawn is. And as the mention that he's connected with this somehow is definitely cool. So,
yeah.
I wonder if we'll get him for a cliffhanger for the end of the next episode. That we just show Thrawn at the end and then cut to credits.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll get there later too. I don't know about you guys. I really smell a big cliffhanger. I don't know how, you can't, I don't think you can really satisfactorily, for our tastes, wrap this up in one episode. I don't know.
I don't think they plan on it.
No.
Yeah. But other than who the heck are all these people, I don't get that much citing from the council.
Sure. Mm-hmm. What about you, Robert? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, just on all the rabbit holes and who are all these people? I mean, I think they're trying to walk this line of making it accessible to people who don't follow the comics and the novels and all the lore and such. And I think for the most part, they're doing a good job. People who don't follow all the other stuff, maybe they don't even know who Thrawn is. And so it's introducing these characters in a way that is present to this show, and I think they did a pretty decent job of that. I thought it was interesting that in talking with Kane, Gideon seemed genuinely surprised that the Mandalorians were presenting a threat, but he was completely ready to present the Mandalorians as the excuse for getting all of the backup that he wanted from the others. And it seems like there's definitely, like, Gideon is setting himself up against Thrawn. Like he's trying to undermine the leadership that Thrawn has, and probably set himself up as the new, I don't know, what's a good phrase to say this? Maybe the heir to the Empire. I don't know if anyone's ever used that phrase before.
Yeah, I think I just trademark right there. Yeah. That's good. I love how many people almost passed out when she had that line in the trailer.
Yeah.
Like, yes, finally. So, well, and there were a couple little interesting ways things were said in the scene, because, trying to think of the order of it. I just rewatched that scene again now, but it's so intricate. Mm-hmm. It's back and forth. But one of them says something about, because Pelion keeps insisting that, the secrecy of Thrawn's return, that's the key. It's all about Thrawn's return. And, that's going to, he said something like it'll herald the resurgence of our military, mm-hmm. which ostensibly is something that's being worked on out of sight from everybody, has no idea. There's a lot more out there. And then he says something about, and that will give Commandant Hux time to basically pull off Project Necromancer. And mm-hmm. then later, when the only other time Necromancer is brought up is Hux, when Gideon's pushing back against the Thrawn thing and says maybe it's time for new leadership. And he says basically that's what Project Necromancer's for. So I'm wondering here, how many people know about Palpatine's Exegol thing versus those who might know about the Snoke aspect of it? Because I think it's fair to say that's kind of confusing, because my understanding is they didn't really have a plan for it, and it was done very sloppy in terms of the sequel trilogy, where they actually wanted to go with it. A lot of different people competing for it. And so now it falls to like Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau and others who I trust to try to make sense of that, but it is confusing. So I don't know what you guys think. Did you have a feel about this? Is this Snoke? Is this Palpatine? Is it both? What do you think?
I think it's one of the things that's really clear is Gideon has his cloning program that he doesn't want the others to know about, that is distinct from Project Necromancer.
Denying he's interested in it, but we just saw him walk past those things and all that stuff.
That's your obsession,
right?
Yeah. Palpatine is what leaped to mind when I heard Necromancer, but I could be persuaded that it refers to Snoke.
Well, wouldn't it imply? I wonder, because I'm not entirely sure, but it does seem to carry with the idea of bringing back from the dead, right?
Exactly.
Which Snoke's not dead. Snoke's part of the process of trying to figure that out. So yeah, that might be
not dead yet.
Right.
And also sort of with that, it's like Palpatine was someone who never let anyone fully know his entire plan.
Right.
So like him using Snoke as Project Necromancer would make sense then, because he would still be in the background controlling Snoke, but they wouldn't know that. They would only know that Snoke is going to be this new leader.
Right.
Back.
That's a good point too, because they all seem like, everybody there, they say Project Necromancer, and you have all these people like, yeah, okay, yeah, sure. But that does seem out of character with the deep secrecy of like the big Sith Eternal plan and all that. So, because he was, you think of, for example, like in Bad Batch, like the way that he used Admiral Rampart, and he's very useful, and then the moment he's not, just see ya. That's a good, yeah. Well, and let me see here. I couldn't resist, maybe a little snide of me, but I always laugh because when we do the whole thing of like, what's your least favorite Star Wars line? I love Poe Dameron. I love Oscar Isaac. No offense to him, but the whole somehow Palpatine returned, like the cheapest line in the history. It's just like, somehow it happened. Like, oh, come on. So that's how I put in my notes. Yes, somehow. But it did make me think a little bit about, and I want to ask you guys this from a faith perspective, because clearly we know, at least behind this, it ultimately is Palpatine, and just to get to his character, and like, this whole thing made me think of envy. you know, and just the really wickedness of envy. And for those who aren't familiar with, you know, like the little bit I looked up here from some of these things like Contingency Plan, Operation Cinder, my understanding is it's basically this idea that he had this contingency plan that if he was ever taken out, the Empire was done. Like there would not be a successor to Palpatine. Like the Empire, like there's not there isn't a single compassionate bone in his body. Like there's nothing in him at all that has any care for anything outside himself. You know, and so that just made me think really of envy, and the idea specifically that the aspect of envy of like, if I can't have it, no one's having it. And how really dark that is, you know. So I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that, because you see it show up in Gideon too, but you know, what, anything you guys have noticed maybe along that path? I didn't ask you ahead of time or anything, but want to get your thoughts.
The whole collapse of the Empire, I was reading up on Nazi Germany again recently, and first of all, Palpatine never let anybody have too much power, playing everybody against each other. That's Hitler's game plan to the T. And second of all, Hitler was never comfortable with any of his successors, and really, by the end, if he wanted everything to burn down with him, if he couldn't survive, he didn't want his empire to survive. And we all know that at least George Lucas worked a lot off the Third Reich for modern the Empire, and I think some of that continues. So they're all plotting because Palpatine never meant them to have an organized system after he was gone. He didn't care what happened after that.
And I think you're right that's the heart of what envy is about. Is it's the, if someone else has it, that means I don't have it. It's like looking at everything in the universe as this zero-sum game, and it either belongs to me or it's hurting me, and that's just directly contrary to the overflowing generosity of God that, you know, we're still celebrating Easter here, right? You know, where, you know, God didn't have to, you know, God could have just forgiven our sins. He didn't have to also promise us the resurrection and eternal life with him. I mean, it's like God is just like, here's good, and there's always more good, and good generates more good. Good kind of is expansive, but envy can't see that.
What about you, Josh? Any thoughts on that?
I don't know. I mean, like,
there's a related thing we'll come back to later too, I think, in Gideon's end thing. But yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I feel like the envy makes sense, but I was more so thinking about a lot of his personal greed instead. I mean, yes, they sort of go hand in hand, and it's just sort of like, I guess, wording. Palpatine was very much full of himself in everything that he did, and like he was like the center of pride of basically everything. Any sort of like any 7 deadly sins, you know, he had them basically. Like he was just checking them off of his list. But I mean, that one definitely shows up in this, especially with Necromancer. If you played the Vader Immortal game, you really sort of get to see that plan in action, and you sort of hear about it earlier in season 2 of The Mandalorian.
Not a lot of detail, but enough to pique your interest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, in the video game, they show sort of like different ships coming up to different planets and just raining fire down, sort of like how they did on Kamino.
Yeah, well, that vengeful, just, yeah, and what they did to. By the way, I got to say this, what they did to Mandalore, but what I was thinking, though, is, I don't know if I've mentioned this before, I probably have, but I'm really kind of stuck. I just have to get over it. The Night of 1,000 Tears thing just doesn't, like the title of it, because I just feel like 1,000 is not, like that's a lot of tears, but that's, I mean, like millions of people died. Like this is genocidal, like world-destroying event. I just feel like that's my personal opinion.
It's less than 1 tear per person.
Right, yeah, like some people were like, well, you know, there you go.
You can't cry if you're dead.
Well, okay, that's fair enough. Josh, I have you to thank for actually, yes, it's because there's only about 1,000 Mandalorians, you know, like 500 left. Like, geez. No, but yeah. But let's just jump over here. But speaking of them, of course, the Mandalorians we now have after, you know, a seemingly divisive episode, at least if you believe what they tell you online. I know we all have our own opinions about episode 6 from this season. I thought there were some things they didn't need to do. But they, of course, achieve at the end of that episode this moment of giving the Darksaber back to Bo-Katan in this way. Father, was that you that called that in the chat, or who was it that?
It was.
I thought, yeah, because I
it's
had
my triumphant moment for the whole season.
and folks, you may not believe it, but it's true. We can all verify. He sent that prediction back weeks and weeks ago after that incident in episode 2 in the Mines of Mandalore. A little technicality, but they're good with it. But so of course Bo-Katan is the Darksaber. She's emerging again as this leader, and we get this brief situation of the two tribes coming together and some of the challenges that brings with it. But the main highlight probably from that whole sequence was this gift, of course, from Greef Karga, the reintroduction of where things are at with IG-11, but now he's IG-12, basically I don't know, somebody said like a Rock'em Sock'em robot type thing. I thought of, do you guys remember the old Ninja Turtles cartoon, how Krang was in that giant suit, the little brain guy, controlling it with levers? I was like, it's like that, so what'd you guys think of that whole introduction of this element to the show for Grogu's mobility?
He can somewhat talk now too.
Yeah,
I kept wondering why they didn't give him more than just a yes and a no button, or maybe that's all he is. I don't know.
Wasn't that like, didn't Pike have Captain Pike had a chair, wasn't it, that had like yes or no buttons on it? Right. It's like we're getting a little crossover here with Star Trek again.
I mean, they did so much to build up IG-11 as a character and really make him sympathetic, and I should say it's a robot, make it sympathetic and give you a deep empathy and attachment, and then to literally gut IG-11 like that and take away all its agency and all its personality and make it, as Karga said, think of it more as a vehicle. And it like takes me back to Solo when and now I'm blanking on the droid's name.
L3.
In Solo. Yeah, L3, and just we'll just plug it into the Falcon and turn a person into a vehicle, and that just really, like, all my moral instincts are just raging against that. It's like, this is not right. I don't care how cute it is, it's not right.
I just wondered if it's as permanent as it. I don't know. How about you, Father?
My next prediction is somewhere along the way they'll find that memory module and plug it back in.
Yeah.
The one that they couldn't find at the start of this season.
I think, I was wondering about what you guys thought about that. Do you think that this is a be-all, end-all kind of thing, or is this just a temporary thing? I don't know.
I'd love to see it stay, especially with, like, how small Grogu is, and that sort of being a way for him to train and then use that as his own Mandalorian weapon. Would be really cool. And then if he gets the Darksaber, he could hold it through the robot.
Well, and of course, we had that scene, that culminating moment where there's a lot of great conversations here between these different, characters, and I don't want to shortchange them. I don't know if there's any you guys want to highlight in particular, but, we would probably spend, at least a half hour just on some of those conversations. But we have this recon operation. They go down. We have representation from both tribes. We get this participation. You get a couple of good. I'm always impressed throughout the show with how well a lot of these actors can pull off communicating emotion or communicating kind of where they're at with no facial features because they're behind these helmets. But just even the way they had pause a couple times, kind of look in this long kind of stare that sort of, I thought showed some sense of thought, right? Or respect, like he's hearing them out kind of thing. When Axe Woves, for example, says like, I was here when this happened, and Rapaz later says to Costco Reeves, like, you lived here, and she's like, we all did, and you see him thinking about this. He's Mandalorian, but like, these guys lived here and this is intense and I respect them even though they're taking their helmets off. So you get some of that, but anything in particular from that to when they're really meeting up with this derelict pirate ship Mandalorian crew that's been there this whole time, and that journey to the Forge that caught your guys' eye? You wanted to go over it all, or?
I step back just a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
Grogu with his outfit and messing with the fruit thing in the market, and just just discovering what it's like to be dad of a 3-year-old, I think.
Oh, absolutely. That was the vibe I was getting the whole way through it. Oh my gosh.
Not deep, but fun.
Yeah,
Well,
we're
actually,
going for the deeper meanings here, Father.
I'm sorry.
Not the fun meanings.
No, well, it's funny because it actually, I can't believe I didn't think of this until you said that, Father. But when my youngest daughter, when she was like, I don't know, about a year and a half, like she's a trickster, she's just very, like, by nature, she's just always into something. And her sister's not really like that, so it's totally like, what are we doing? Like, I don't know what to do with this kid. So we were walking through this farmer's market, and we have all this stuff we're trying to get, and, we get to pay for it. And then we look at her for the first time in like 30 seconds, like we're carrying her, but then we look at her and she's just chowing down on a tomato. And I'm like, where did you get that? And I look back, and there's a tomato stand like 6 feet behind us, and she's just like, like points at it. I'm like, okay, sorry. And like the girls at the register are laughing, and we're paying them and everything. So yeah, I can't believe I didn't I don't know if it was Favreau himself or Filoni, like someone involved in writing or talking about that episode has been through that situation before. But was there anything, I jokingly in my notes here, folks, I was calling them the Black Pearl Mandos. I said it was reminiscent to me of the pirate ship, in Jack Sparrow's pirate ship down in Davy Jones's locker, and I guess that's the beginning of what's happening.
I was getting Road Warrior vibes out of it.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
Yeah,
totally. Yeah. So, any thoughts on this sequence, like Bo's conversation with them, the backstory, and how she lost the Darksaber, which we didn't know? I mean, there's so much there we could unpack.
I thought it was interesting how quickly those pirates, like the pirate Mandalorians, quickly like re-swore their allegiance to Bo. Yeah. And it's almost like they didn't know that she tried selling them out, basically. And sort of like what happened, I guess, in that time.
I mean, I didn't get the sense that she certainly wasn't trying to sell them out. It kind of,
no, it was,
she was betrayed herself. But this is one of the things I am loving this season about Bo-Katan. I mean, this is almost like season 1 of Bo-Katan.
Right.
And I just love the depth and the nuance of her character, and like all the shades of guilt and shame that she feels. And she's like, every episode she takes a step to face her past and face the consequences of her actions, and step into that, and like not make excuses. Just, this is what I did. I thought it was for the best. I was wrong. And she just,
she owns it. She owns it, and she's taking the risk that all of them will say, well, you let us down, we're done with you. But she doesn't want to play the fake game. She says, this is me, this is who you're getting.
Exactly. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, and I was just trying to look it up. Look, I think I found it here. I really thought Din's comment to her was really interesting. And so he says, she's stressed out, she's worried. She says, I don't know if I can keep everyone together. There's too much animosity, and this blade is all I have to unify our people. And then he says, I only know of this weapon what you taught me. To be honest, it means nothing to me or my people, nor does station or bloodline. What means more to me is honor and loyalty and character. These are the reasons I serve you, Lady Kryze. And he says something like, your song has not been written, and I'll serve you until it is. And it's just like that whole, I love that kind of thing. Like to me, there's a lot of Tolkien in this to me. Like it just, not to the same level, quite frankly, because I'm a Tolkien guy through and through. But I was telling my wife, there were a lot of things like she had mentioned before, like all the stuff underground and the Forge, like it's very Moria-like, right? The Mines of Moria. Even in this episode, this sort of a sea monster coming up out from underneath right outside the gate to the Forge reminds me of like when they go into Moria. and there's that octopus thing. I forget what it's called, you know. So it seems like there's a lot of connections like that. But this character, the importance of character, the importance of honor. I just feel like it's stuff you don't see in a lot of TV these days, you know, like someone who actually is living that and it's having an effect on Bo-Katan, who was this skeptic, you know, or had become so jaded. And we've seen, like you said, Robert, was just what I wanted to add to what you were saying, is just to really see the depth of that, of how she's being sort of like reverted almost, you know, and rediscovering her own culture and all the texture of that. So yeah, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I mean, she's totally going to be killed at the end of the series, though.
I think so.
Yeah, I think at next episode, Bo-Katan dies. That's my prediction. Because
see how much money they make off her after this season.
Oh man, that would be. I'll tell you, for those who said there's no stakes, and I thought, you know, for some people I was listening to and reading, I agree that like a lot of this season at first, like some of the fights and stuff, like things basically worked out. Like it wasn't super difficult, but with Paz, which we'll get to here in a little bit, you know, like they brought the stakes in in a pretty powerful way. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they did that. I don't know. Father Josh, what do you guys think about that? Do you think that might be on the table?
It hadn't occurred to me.
Processing.
Which doesn't mean it's impossible, right? I don't see the arc going that direction, but if they want to pull a fast one, they sure could.
Yeah, I don't know. I have my own predictions for the next episode, so
we'll get there.
We'll get there. I don't want to get too much of
it. Yeah. So now that they go into the forge here, you know, I wanted to spend a little time here, you know, our sort of second half that we're doing here, the show with this. I don't know. I want to see what you guys thought about this setup, and then we'll get into all the details of this big build up for this final segment. But I don't know if I was slow on this or what. Like I really avoided spoilers and everything, but I did not, the way they did it, I did not make the connection, or I didn't predict it, I'll put it that way, of where Moff Gideon was this whole time. And I was just I really liked it. I was blown away. And like, even though we saw those troopers with clearly Mandalorian garb, we know that's his thing though. Like he's obsessed with Mandalore and all that. So I just kind of assumed he's off somewhere. It just never crossed my mind. And I thought that was a big twist for me. I don't know. How about you guys? What'd you think?
I thought that was like a very interesting way to introduce him into the episode, of him walking in and out of those laser gates that you see from like the Phantom Menace, and seeing the Mandalorian stormtroopers is what I think that they are, because they looked a lot like the ones from Rebels, just sort of in live action, which made me feel like, okay, so now he has like Mandalorians who are actually following him. And so like he does have some sort of claim to Mandalorian like rule of some sort. But I had no idea that it was on Mandalore. I thought he was on some like off world, trying to like piece together what he could and then like doing something. But yeah, I had no idea.
I did. My Admiral Akbar side was screaming at me when the first wave went away and they started running along, not paying attention. Like, guys, haven't you ever heard of fake retreats to draw you into the ambush before? But it's a trap.
I guess they didn't want to overuse it.
But I was not expecting. I was not expecting. You can't overuse that line. Come on. But I was not expecting that to be Moff Gideon's base and have all the equipment there and all that stuff.
Although as soon as they rounded the corner, like with you, Father, I was like, oh, this is an ambush they're being led into. But as soon as they rounded the corner into that clearly constructed tunnel,
that Imperial,
I was like, this is not Mandalorian architecture. This looks Imperial in its architecture. And I don't think I like consciously thought, oh, this is Gideon's base, but it made it clear, oh, the Empire, you know, this is not the first time the Empire has been here. And so yeah, coming out on the whole hangar bay there, and
then it made sense. I didn't think about it till probably after the episode because so much is happening here at this point, but totally makes sense why they were able to launch that enormous, sortie against Bo-Katan's palace so quickly, and that it was not just because, they had this. this activity, you know, like on Mandalore, like, hey, wait, there's people showing up on Mandalore now, and they see her ship there, like they're clearly scouting it, and it's like, oh yeah, let's just, you know, send the bombers, send everybody. Because I haven't seen that episode in a while. That was the one a lot of people didn't like, right? Or, well, people were critical of because so much of it was on Coruscant. And like, it's like I always say too, there's episodes I like, there's episodes I'm like, I didn't like that one as much. But, you know, there is something to be said for like being patient, like to see how it, you know, connects. Because that was, of course, a big payoff there, that this was something, we got this taste way back in episode whatever, 3, I think it was, you know, that, wait, where is this, you know, group of fighters coming from? Well, like a system and a half away, because they're on Mandalore.
Or
you
like
know, geez.
2 or 3 planets over.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I'd have to go back and look at like some of my nerd books and stuff. But I don't remember if like TIE interceptors or bombers have hyperspace capability.
I think interceptors do.
Okay.
Thrawn was developing one that could do hyperspace, but that was in Rebels. For the most part, they couldn't.
Okay. But they did, you know, then they mentioned, of course, at the beginning of this in the Shadow Council, when they're talking about his requisition order, which, to be fair, at least he got what he was asking for. Captain Carson, forget his name, he didn't, he just got the, you know, the dismissal from Tim Meadows earlier when he went to Coruscant. He's like, I'm sorry, I wish we could do more, you know. So these Imperials, they get the job done, I guess. But yeah, he specifically mentioned the Interceptor program, or, you know, your Interceptor squadron, I guess. And that's when I was like, wait a minute, like, yeah, it was Interceptors specifically that were going after her. So, but I guess one question I had for you guys that somebody else mentioned, I thought was worth bringing up is, you know, when, of course, they have the ambush, they trapped in outside, and everybody else is back behind that blast door, and then Gideon lands in his all flare and everything, in his full Mandalorian, you know, or his Beskar Dark Trooper outfit. And some people brought up the fact that, like, he's very clear that, you know, he's the new, or like the ultimate Dark Trooper because it has him inside it. Which, you know, is a very specifically selfish comment about himself. But somebody was pointing out, you know, Dr. Pershing's whole thing in season 2 about when he's telling them about those Dark Troopers and how, you know, it's the thing that makes them best, top of the line, you know, is specifically that there isn't anyone in it. Did you remember that? Like, he gives that speech about how, like, you know, this is the perfect machine kind of thing. Like, it doesn't need a person in it. So I didn't know if that was if I was reading too much into that, or if Gideon's comment is just about himself more than anything. That seemed like.
Yeah, I think that's just his pride speaking there, of wanting to be sort of like the best person out there.
I mean, you were talking about envy earlier, and I was noticing the detailing, like the undersuit that he's wearing is very reminiscent of Vader's sort of ribbed undersuit, and I was thinking, like, they are pulling on all of the classic Star Wars villains in you know, he's got the horns and the red and black, which remind you of Maul, and, you know, the chest plate, and the kind of undersuit that remind you of Vader. And of course, you know, all of the Mandalorian things that remind you of Boba Fett, who is still a villain. I don't care what the book of Boba Fett says. He's still a villain. And yeah, so it's, you know, they're kind of really building him into this ultimate kind of, yeah, the ultimate Star Wars baddie.
Yeah.
I thought when he first came into frame in the bottom half, I really thought that was supposed to be a Vader revisit of some sort, because it just had so many of those Vader vibes to it.
Even down to the reddish visor. Remember, like, classically, like the original Vader mask, it was more of a dark red lens than like a black lens, and his voice, right? It's his voice, but, you know, and, you know, I mean, gosh, I saw interviews, you guys probably did too, where when they were in first, you know, sort of talks with Giancarlo Esposito for the role, and he was really interested, but he just said he was bragging about how he said to Jon Favreau, he's like, I need a cape. You know, he was the one that was like, I have to have a cake. Like and you can just tell, like, he loves, like, he's chewing up that scenery, you know, like, he loves that role. Like, he is so in that. And I think that brings something to the character too, or this character that he's incarnating, right, is someone who, like he says, that was interesting, right? He said all these, you know, cultures have their, you know, their special, like, he's just so dismissive. You know, it's like, you were great once, but your time has come. Like, he's so, you know, there's no respect for human life. There's no respect for culture. It's just a very utilitarian, like, what works, what doesn't. And he's talking specifically about, like, I want to take what the cloners did. I want to take what the Jedi did. I want to, it's just so completely inorganic, right? Like, it's Frankenstein type, right? Like, I'm gonna get this and this and then put this suit together. And
one of the
one
of the persistent things I noticed, and it came up again in this, is the Empire and its offshoots are always selling peace and order. We're bringing peace, bringing order, but it's a very rigid, you do it our way or you're gone type of order, destroying individuality.
Despite what was said in the Shadow Council at the beginning, you know, and I don't remember her name, but she said, you know, there are people loyal to the Empire on every planet who are getting tired of this new republic and its rules and regulations.
Yeah, I'm like, says you? Like, what? Says the Imperial Shadow Council? Like, says the only people who have had, you know, constantly a planet destroying technology.
Well, and are not lacking in rules and regulations either, as we definitely see from, like, Andor, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I always get the feeling that the people who are running the galaxy in Andor are the same people who are running for the New Republic. Just swap the bosses out, same people doing the grunt work.
Well, I wonder that in some cases, if you also had some people like, you know, I know, not to bring up a sore subject for some people, but, you know, Jack Black's character, right back in episode, what was it, 22, you know, this, and we've seen this, it's an intriguing idea, I think, of just this range, whether people think it's being done well or not, but this range of, like, what do you do with these guys? Like, not everybody's Tarkin. Like, not everybody's Vader. Like, is this guy, like, okay. And, you know, that of course brings up all the discussion about, you know, the wake of World War II and Operation, was it Paperclip and stuff, and just all this kind of stuff. Like, what do you, like, was this guy a Nazi or was he a Nazi? Like, it's, you know, I mean, like, because, and to bring it home for us Catholics too, like, you know, we all know how much in the popular media for a while, like, they were really trying to drive home that thing of, like, you know, Benedict XVI of happy memory, like, oh, he was Hitler Youth. And I'm like, so was, like, every kid in Germany practically, like, you were forced into this, or you were, you know, you were in their version of Boy Scouts or something, and all of a sudden you come in one day and no, it's Hitler Youth now. Like, okay, you know, and it doesn't matter that his dad was such an outspoken anti-Nazi, you know, police officer and stuff, and they had to move around and everything, like, this heroic courage. So I think that's an interesting thing to explore in Star Wars, with this idea of, like, not everybody who was an Imperial was, you know, necessarily demonic, you know, so that's maybe some interesting area to explore as well, you know, so I kind of went off script there, but that's okay. See what you guys think about it.
Well, and exploring the you know, the problematic aspects of the Jedi and the, you know, the Old Republic and the New Republic and frankly, you know, the Mandalorian, the infighting among the Mandalorians. And I think one of my disappointments about this episode was we got a really great moment of that conflict in the game, where it's like, these primitives don't know how to play this game, and it suddenly turns into a death match, and I'm like, oh yeah, we're really gonna see how this conflict can get resolved. But it doesn't really get resolved. Grogu steps in and no. And it's like, you know, I can see that pausing the fight and getting people to take a step back, but there was no actual resolution to that. Except that, you know, consistently from that point on, you see Paz Vizsla and Axe Woves, like, supporting each other like, it's kind of game recognizes game, and they suddenly they fight, and then they're best friends.
Well, but then also, and it's interesting though, that's a good point, because this starts to get into some questions that we were going to talk about here with this, like maybe some speculation too, but like Axe, it's interesting, like, because you see Paz gives his life here at the end, right? Is this, they take Din off to the conference room, or whatever he called it, not conference room, what do you call it, the debriefing room?
That's yes,
far more interesting, I guess, sounding. Take him to the conference room, like, okay, like that's
take him to my side office,
right? Like, okay, the debriefing room, but so that's, of course, we're heading there, which, by the way, well, mark my words, that helmet's coming off, because I just read this, the practical side of this. Apparently, this was funny. This makes sense. Apparently, to be able to, in negotiations, from what I read, to be able to credit and to pay Pedro Pascal as more than just a voice actor, he needs to have his face on screen for like at least some time. And I was like, well, that's fair enough. But this, this of course would be the only season so far where in the 7th or 8th episode of the season, he doesn't take his helmet off, or someone does, whatever. So I'm fully expecting that. That's a prediction. But you have this, they take him off. It's curtains, for the rest of the Mandalorians. But then we have Bo making the escape with the Darksaber, and Paz stays behind, of course. But Axe is not there. Right. So because he left to go get reinforcements. I don't know if I don't trust him or whatever, but that's what you were saying, Robert. The reason I bring that aspect of it up is you don't really get the payoff even of him like directly witnessing the sacrifice, if that makes sense, of the guy he was fighting. So that could be a gap, that might have been something to pay, unless, of course, Axe is dirty and he's actually a spy himself, which I don't know.
I mean, he's a mercenary, so there's that. But yeah, I don't know.
Do you guys have any? Well, let me just back up. I'm sorry. Why don't we just talk about the your thoughts on the Praetorian Guard and just sort of finish that loop off here, and then we can get to the spies thing. But they're mentioned, of course, as part of Gideon's request at the beginning. There were spoilers about this earlier this year, or rumors about it, in terms of costume design. What'd you guys think of their presence here? Or did it affect you? Was it not that big of a deal? Did it seem like, well, okay, sequel trilogy connection, there's different reactions. You loved it, Josh? What'd you love the most?
Yeah, it was just seeing them sort of walk in and then just mop the floor against him.
They're intense.
And well, yeah, because they're supposed to be like the best of the best there, and like they've been trained to be like the top people, because they come like straight basically from like the Emperor's Guards equivalent, and sort of seeing them get more action than just standing there looking cool is really, really nice to see. It was really sad to see Paz die, but I mean, it's bound to happen.
Do any of you guys know, because I am curious, when you said about that, the Emperor's Guard, for some reason I was thinking, because the aesthetic is very much in line with what we see then in Last Jedi. But I'm wondering that timeline wise, like I have no idea like who these guys are or anything like that, like in like behind the mask, but like, you see famously those red Praetorian Guards with Palpatine in Return of the Jedi. They don't really do anything, but would these be like from that original group? Maybe. I mean, this is only 5 years or so after Return of the Jedi. So I don't know if you guys had heard anything about that or have any ideas or thoughts about.
I don't know.
The lineage. I have no idea. They haven't revealed anything.
I mean, my sort of guess is that they're still in the red outfits. So it's like they're supposed to be the equivalent just for like the First Order. But
right.
I don't know. I haven't seen anything about like how they transition there.
Except we're not at the First Order yet.
Right.
We're still at the remnant of the Empire. And I think I was a little disappointed that the costumes were so similar to, maybe even identical with, the ones from The Last Jedi. Which are cool costumes, don't get me wrong, but I like, it did like raise timeline questions for me, and so I was wondering. I guess I wanted something a little closer to what we saw in Return of the Jedi.
Oh god, yeah, like no real transition to the new ones.
Flowier capes or something. I don't know.
Yeah, because I haven't seen that in a while.
One thing I also sort of saw was them somehow relating to the Knights of Ren and having some sort of backfill in there. But I don't know. That was a quick glimpse while I was scrolling through Instagram one day.
Wikipedia doesn't have much on the batch that showed up in this episode, so I don't think they've established what, if any, the connection is.
Okay. I'm trying to find. Yeah, because they show that, if you like, I haven't seen Return of the Jedi in a long time, but yeah, they were more uniform, right? And they had the cloak like the whole way down and the helmet, and also these guys' helmets did have a little Mandalorian flair to them, though, too. I thought, like the way the visor was and stuff, but
could be, yeah.
Look it back up a little bit. I mean, I see that still more as like an in between from. They look like advanced stormtroopers, honestly.
It might be, yeah, actually, because. They had more, in Last Jedi, they had more, like, almost samurai-like the tapering down, or the tiers of, like, the armor, and, like, they had a couple different helmet designs, it looks like. I haven't seen it in a while. I was joking around with some of the guys in the panel a while back that for whatever reason I decided to watch, like, the first thing it was a bridge event, the last thing I did in 2022, and the first thing I did in 2023 was watch The Last Jedi. I don't really know why. I just thought it would be an interesting experience to sort of, because I have very mixed opinions about that movie, but to those who hate it, I thought it'd be kind of funny to share that story with them. Be like, well, hey, the years, it's all up from here. No,
the past is dead. Kill it.
No, so that we'll have to see more if they reveal any more about that, or if those Praetorian guards. I mean, I would be surprised if we don't see them again next week, right? Like, would that be kind of
it'd be a waste of them if they didn't come back. A waste of the whole
thing. Like, what's the point of just that? I don't know. If one of them takes out Bo, I'm going to be very upset.
I think Grogu's he's separated from Din. Not by his own wanting, and he's got a powerful droid output to work with. It could be interesting to see what happens if he gets mad.
Yeah, he's like, he doesn't get as big as Hulk, but at least as formidable. And he's green, so
I wonder how many of IG-11's weapons are still active on IG-12.
I thought that too. Yeah.
Gosh, I hadn't even thought of that for some reason. That's a good. Oh wow.
I mean.
You just start pressing buttons on a board.
Yeah.
Bounty hunter nanny tank. Yeah.
Or he takes the wires, like he was mixing up the wires in that episode of season 2, like plugging them in the wrong places. Like the. Well, I thought let's just jump up here as we're getting close to the end. Just getting back to that title, right? Like we have this intense episode. It's getting crazy reviews online. Yeah, I think compared to most of the other episodes in the season, like a lot of people really enjoyed this one and are excited for next week. I did hear, nothing that gave anything away, but is it Brendan Wayne, John Wayne's grandson, who's one of the stunt doubles that's in the suit, for Din Djarin, was being interviewed, and he was just like being coy and said something about like, you're gonna regret asking for another episode after that last one. Like, wait till you see episode, 8 or this season. I'm like, oh man, don't do that to me. So there's some big stuff coming, I guess. But again, the title of this episode is The Spies, plural. And it starts off with, Elia Kane. I think I said it differently at the beginning. Elia Kane, TK, she gave her TK number. I should have memorized that one. But she's clearly a spy. We got that earlier. That was pretty obvious. I think, Father, you were pointing that out earlier. But it doesn't say the spy. It's the spies, which when I got to the end of the episode, I did think about that for the first time since it showed up at the beginning. And I'm like, that feels like a weird title. I don't really know why they went with that. And so I'm curious what you guys think. It's clearly a plural title. Do you think that they will reveal another side to this, that there's another spy maybe among the Mandalorians?
Maybe there's a spy on Moff Gideon's team reporting back to the Republic.
That would be cool.
Could it be Hux?
I knew it. And then he gets blasted. Oh my gosh.
No. I mean,
I don't think we're that lucky.
I've seen people accusing the armor of being a spy, and I can see why they would make that argument, but I don't think I buy it. And I've also seen people talking about, well, the whole expedition is going to scout out or to spy out Mandalore. And so the spies might be the whole expedition. And on kind of the flip side of that coin, the spies could be Gideon's secret base there. That covert operation that he's got going on there. So I think, people were saying, oh, well, there's only one spy. We need to find another spy. I'm almost thinking there are too many spies.
That's an interesting thought. Yeah.
So we were sort of talking about it a little bit ago, but having the Mandalorians also sort of get along too well with each other, not really having that resolution made it also seem like there's a lot of intermercenary work between them and possibly Moff Gideon of working together. And I sort of am seeing sort of how the armorer could be a spy as well, but not entirely. It's more so just because of her similarities in the helmet compared to Gideon's. But then again, that's just because of Maul, and Maul was the leader of the people on Concord Dawn and on the moon, and that they sort of just got the spikes on their helmets. But
and I don't know about you guys, but I feel like it would be, I love Maul. I really love what they did with his character, in the series and everything. But just from a movie standpoint and a TV show standpoint, we saw that reaction, I think, from a lot of folks at the end of Solo when he shows up there, that were just like, who is that? Like, what? Okay. Like, and then you're like, oh, that's Maul. And like, Maul, like the guy that got cut in half in 1999, and it really is a misstep, I thought, because if you don't know the stuff that's happened in the animated series, it makes no sense at all to see him on screen. And so I gotta say, I think for any reference whatsoever to him to be made in episode 8 of this, or some sort of like, oh, it's a Maul thing, I just think that would really probably be a misstep and a distraction, especially because he's dead at this point, in the timeline.
Yeah, and it definitely, completely, like, indisputably dead.
Right, like Monty Python. I'm not quite dead. Like, no, ceased to be. But then Luke says no one's ever really gone. But no, the only thing I would just mention about the armor, I want to see what you guys think about this, because for me, the one thing I keep going back to, I haven't heard anyone bring this up yet, that to me is kind of like it can't be her, like I think she's legit, is because not just that we saw her killing those stormtroopers in the covert, right, at the end of season 1, but that it's just her and them. Like, there's no one else, and none of the other characters saw that. We just saw it. So, like, if there's any kind of, like, she's putting on airs, or she's kind of, she's playing this game where you could say, well, maybe she was faking it so they would see and trust her. Well, no, it's like, it was just us and her. Like, she was there alone. Like, we basically get the little window into her world when no one else is looking, and we see her do that. So I don't know. To me, that would be a big sort of head scratcher, at least, if all of a sudden it's like, well, no, she's been with Gideon the whole time. Like, I
mean, I think there's been some speculation for a while that the armorer is actually Rook Cast, who was part of the Death Watch, that became part of Maul's, what did he call it? Shadow Collective or something like that. And there's that shadow word again. And so, and I think that speculation was based simply on the horns on the helmet. And so that would, seeing, okay, horns on Gideon's helmet and some sort of Maul-ish aesthetic references. Well, maybe she's compromised in some way. But that's like a speculation based on a speculation based on a speculation. And I'm not sure I buy it. And like you, her behavior has been so consistent. I think she's got a lot of complexity to her and might end up being a bad guy in some respect, an antagonist in some way, but I don't think she's the traitor or a spy in that sense.
Well, there's a lot of questions. I don't know. Is there, and the other possibility I just threw out there, the last thing I had down was just like, could it be one of those Black Pearl Mandos, as I dubbed them, which to me, if you want to, it's sort of low hanging fruit, the idea that, well, maybe someone there, but I don't know. Those guys don't seem to like, what do they owe the Empire, unless they're completely fake in their plans, and everything they've said is a lie. I mean, they are the most recent, like we just got them dropped on us. So that would be suspicious. Maybe, I don't know. But no, yeah, Rob, you bring up a good point too about like it might just be overthinking it, like it's spies everywhere. So well, it's just, I guess, maybe just as far as where we go from here, any final thoughts? Because I know some of you guys, I know Josh, you had mentioned about some speculation you have. Do you guys want to share any things you want to see, things you don't want to see, predictions for next week for what it's worth? I don't know if any of you were on the show next week. I won't be or anything. So what do you guys think?
I think the Mythosaur is coming out and we'll get to see that. If they're on Mandalore, Bo's probably going to go try and tame it and take it up there.
Get it in the fight somehow.
Somehow. And then I want to see Baby Yoda and Grogu eventually just hop on its back, kind of like how he did with the Rancor.
That's, people speculated that too, that, who's the one that, we've seen tame a giant animal.
I can see it all leading up to where Grogu ends up the ruler of Mandalore. Sure, anything that could work out that way. Not in the next episode.
That's the one I called early in the season.
Is that right?
I forgot it from you.
Yeah.
I'd love to see that. I mean,
Grogu riding the Mythosaur, wielding the Darksaber
on an IG-12
in IG-12's chest. Like Hasbro's just sitting there with dollar signs, just like
take my money, take my money.
Yeah, like it's like, what else can we do, guys? I don't know, like maybe the Millennium Falcon's in there too. So we're like, okay, you guys got to stop. Like,
no. We take an alien, put him in a robot, and then put him on a dinosaur.
Right. It's like oh my gosh, it's gonna happen.
What can possibly go wrong?
Yeah, I the only prediction I would say I have is just that I don't think we're gonna get resolution per se, because, and the thing is, and they're very clearly timing this. And I always like this stuff. I kind of nerd out on like the precision of like the PR side of it. That was part of, I worked in that world a little bit, in the Army actually. And it's just funny because it's like, if you remember back to, I have to go double check the dates specifically because I don't remember the order, but I remember that the week that the episode came out from season 1, where Grogu force heals Grief Karga's arm, I think was just a few days after A Rise of Skywalker came out, and they introduced the Force healing. I know it was the same week. I'm pretty sure Rise of Skywalker introduced it first, and then you saw it in Mandalorian, and you're like, oh, it's a thing. Okay. And say what you will about that Force power, but I thought the timing here was neat, that the very week with Celebration, right, that they put that Ahsoka trailer out, that they show you Thrawn on screen for the first time. And then you kick this episode off with, oh, we have to, the secrecy, Thrawn's return is everything. You might as well have Pelion going, you gotta see the Ahsoka show. Like it's basically, it was like a secondary trailer, right, for the Ahsoka show. So I fully expect us to get a lot of stuff that's set up now, but that we get some, what's what I'm looking for? Not closure, but we actually get the payoff before having to wait for another Mandalorian season.
Do you say Ahsoka's going to be Mandalorian 3.5?
Basically, I think they're all, because now they've announced too that this is leading to this film too eventually down the road where they tie all these things together.
Never happened.
No.
I don't know. Filoni's behind it, so
that's true.
I do have one last question for you guys. I didn't put on the notes or anything here, but kind of related to this. Do you have any specific predictions about the post-credits scene? Because that's kind of an expected thing these days. You think they'll... I feel like they wouldn't give you Thrawn in the post-credit.
Like
they could. I don't know. I don't know. I kind of feel like they've built him up for that show, but maybe.
I'd love to see some sort of interaction between Gideon and Thrawn there as to what he needs to do to come back to him. And sort of this idea, because Gideon right now seems to want to control Mandalore and control something. And Thrawn is called this heir to the Empire, and seeing them interact with each other would be interesting in a...
What about like a hologram or something? Like it's just like an unexpected hologram, and you just hear that iconic voice, and that's just, oh man, something like that would be cool.
The only prediction I can possibly make is somehow Cassian Andor returned.
Or even Exegol of them getting Palpatine to come back.
I would say something about Jar Jar, but now that Ahmed Best's actually been in the show, I don't think we need to go that way.
I think, oh man, I would love that post-credits scene. Maybe they get away in the armors, making the next little piece of armor for Grogu, and he gets his little flashback, and like the Jar Jar's there. Yes, the guy's here. Like, oh no! Talk about whatever your opinion of Jar Jar is. I would take the wind out of the sails a little bit of the season 3 finale.
That new bit of armor that Grogu got is probably going to play a role in the new season or in the next episode, though. I mean that would be something to pay off.
It's a good point. Yeah, because it's so specific. Like, they could make it anything and it would be fun, but to specifically give that to him and that you don't see it, right? It's not something he's wearing on the outside or something that's in there. But if he's already wearing the chainmail stuff, like, it's got to be something pretty significant. I don't know. Think the Mythosaur is going to try to bite him?
I know it could be a Frodo in the Mines of Moria situation where he gets stabbed and or shot or something, and they think he's dead, and
oh my gosh, that wouldn't.
Somehow Grogu returned. Oh, sorry.
Somehow. All right. Well, you guys have anything else for the good of the order? Or are we good for now? Just excited for Wednesday.
Yeah. Hopefully, no more tears.
Yeah. We'll see.
Or only 1,000 of them.
Yeah, just 1,000. Just 1,000. Well, folks, that's it from us for tonight. Listeners, please let us know what you thought of this episode of The Mandalorian. And if you anytime you want, you can send us some feedback over there at StarWars@SQPN.com, or you can visit our Discord community at SQPN.com/Discord. You can go ahead and check out StarQuest on Facebook, on Twitter. Just find us on there. Also, I would recommend this too if you want to go back and listen to previous episodes, because this is really, we're developing our own canon here in-house of some fun conversations. So that's SQPN.com/Star Wars. You can find old episodes of the show, previous episodes. We also want to take a moment to thank our sponsors here, our patrons for Secrets of Star Wars, including Andrea J., Johannes B., Christopher L., Jarrett B., and Guy C. Their generations. I'm having trouble reading, folks. Their generous donations at SQPN.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Star Wars and all of the shows here at StarQuest. So you can join them by visiting SQPN.com/give, and I really hope you do that today. And while you're doing that, make sure you check out our merch store as well at SQPN.com/merch. You can get all kinds of stuff: phone cases, t-shirts, skateboards, magnets, tons of stuff on there. So last but not least, please make sure, of course, that you tell everyone you can about the show, anyone you think will really appreciate it. Secrets of Star Wars you can find on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, also on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel while you're over there as well. So we will be back next week to unpack the season finale, chapter 24, yet unnamed, or at least as far as we know, of The Mandalorian Season 3. So make sure you mark your calendars. You're not going to want to miss that one. So until next time, Josh Beeghley, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of Star Wars.
Always happy to join.
Robert King, thank you so much as well.
Oh, thanks for a great conversation.
And Father Geoff Horton, thank you so much as well.
Glad to be here.
I'm Mike Creavey, and thank you for listening to The Secrets of Star Wars on StarQuest.
Here's another show on the StarQuest Network you're sure to enjoy, The Secrets of Star Trek. Find it wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/StarTrek.